Today we're comparing the Huawei Mate 20 Pro versus the Honor View 20 in an in-depth look at the Pro settings on both of these smartphone cameras. Alright, so let's first look at the Honor View 20 Pro settings. Now you can find these up here in the More section, and then you've got Pro here. So right now I'm just using window lighting. There's no artificial light in here at all. So forgive me if the photos look a bit different by the time I get round to doing the Mate 20 Pro photos. But anyway, let's start with this. In the top left corner, they're nice enough to give you a bit of guidance as to what each thing does. So the first thing we're going to look at is the metering mode, which is down here. So you can actually set it to wide or spot focus. So the metering is done based off what you choose. For the sake of this photo, I'm going to use the spot focus in the middle. Next up, what you see here is the spirit level. So basically right now it's tilted slightly off, and we can actually balance it up just by adjusting the tripod a little bit. There we go, perfectly balanced. That's really nice, and it's gone off. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is shutter speed. I almost forgot to do this, but have a look at this. When you go into shutter speed on the Honor View 20, automatically it's on auto. But you can set the shutter speed to 1/4000th of a second, and all the way down to a 30-second long exposure. So if you've got this on the tripod and you're doing some nice sort of scenery, but it's quite dark, you can actually do a really long exposure here on the Honor View 20. And then the other great thing about the Honor View 20 is the fact that it actually has that 48 megapixel resolution, which is crazy. So this is something you might want to experiment with in those low light scenarios. But that's really awesome. Great shutter speeds there on the Honor View 20. So I pulled down the blackout blinds, I closed the curtains, made sure all the lights were off, including the blue light behind Wolverine, and took this photo with a 30-second long exposure shutter speed. Check it out, I was really impressed with this shot here. Literally, it was pitch black in the room. So let's move on to the next thing, the ISO. So the ISO will allow you to adjust for those lower light shots, and it goes all the way as high as 102,400. So in really low light conditions, you're going to be able to still get a photo, but you can see there's nice little pop-up indications as to when you're overexposed, which we clearly are right now. So what we can do here is actually go back into the ISO. What I recommend you do is get as low an ISO as possible for your photo. That way you're not going to lose too much detail. So around 50 is perfect for this shot. But for the next step, I'm going to put it back to auto just so I can show you the exposure levels. So here we have exposure level, where we can actually brighten and darken the photo without adjusting the ISO. And I actually quite like to darken this photo just a bit. Now as you can see, in the middle of the photo is Wolverine, and he's completely out of focus. So what we can do is go into the autofocus and manual focus settings. Right there we've got continuous autofocus, and we've got manual. It's currently on manual, and then what we can actually do here is focus that in beautifully on the subject of the photo, which is the Wolverine. And you can actually use this to add a bit of that bokeh effect, the blurry background effect that everybody loves so much these days. Now the last setting is the white balance, and there's some presets here. So you've got daylight, you've got artificial light, you've got incandescent light, you've got cloudy mode, and you've got auto white balance. But then you've also got an option to custom adjust your white balance. So you can actually adjust it for yourself if you want slightly warmer, slightly cooler. Where I normally have my cameras around 5500, but for the sake of this photo, I actually really did like the incandescent setting, which was this one. So there we go, that's the Pro settings. Let me take a photo of this now, and we'll put these side by side with the Mate 20 Pro photo at the end. Alright, so now let's jump into the Mate 20 Pro camera Pro settings. So different from the View 20, you actually got the setting right here for Pro mode, and similar to the View 20, up in the top left corner you've got your sort of index as to what everything does, which is really handy if you're learning photography. And the metering mode right now is currently set to center, which is where I'm going to keep it. If I was taking a landscape shot, I'd probably change that. Next on the menu is the ISO, which is currently set to 200, and let's see how high this goes in comparison to the View 20. So you can see here it goes up to 6400, which isn't quite the same or even close to the View 20, but that's because the way that this camera works with the 3 lenses is slightly different. But trust me when I say this, this is one of the best low light shooters you can get. But for the sake of this photograph, let's bring that ISO all the way down as low as it can go. Okay, so the shutter speeds on the Mate 20 Pro. Similar, well actually identical to the View 20, 1/4000th of a second is the fastest. Now let's see what the longest is we can go. So exactly the same as the View 20, a 30-second long exposure. So I did the same thing again here with the Mate 20 Pro, a 30-second long exposure in pitch black. I pulled down the blinds, closed the curtains, turned all the lights out. It was literally pitch black, and this is the photo it came back with. I'm super impressed with both of these phones' long exposure capabilities. So before I can even show you the next bit, I actually have to set the ISO back to auto, because in order to adjust the exposure value you have to have that on auto. So let's go into exposure, and you can see here you can change the brightness and the darkness of the photo. I like the slightly darker photo like I did with the View 20, so I'm going to have it around about there. Next up, very similar to the View 20 camera, you can go into the settings for autofocus. Right now it's on continuous, and I'm going to switch it over to manual. So that looks perfect there. Wolverine is perfectly focused in the center of the photo. Now onto the white balance. Again, very similar to what you saw on the View 20. You've got the cloudy mode, incandescent mode, artificial light, natural light, and then you've got the custom white balance. Again, just so these photos are a bit similar, I'm going to choose the incandescent there. And remember, you can always go into the settings up here and change the resolution. So right now we're set to 4:3 at 40 megapixels, which is the highest. We've also got it set to RAW as well, just like the View 20. So let's take the photo and let's see how they look side by side. So remember guys, when it comes to Pro mode photos, it's really down to your creative preferences. So don't judge these two smartphone cameras based off of my settings. What I suggest you do is play around with them yourself. But hopefully, if you're really into photography, you'll know what these phones are capable of by seeing these menus. And if you want to check out the latest prices on these two phones, or the specs of the camera, stuff like that, follow the links below this video and you can find all that stuff out. And if you didn't watch my shootout video between these two, I was out in Dubai shooting guns, visiting the Burj Khalifa and all kinds of other cool stuff like that. So if you want to check that out, there'll be a thumbnail at the end of this video. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up, and if you loved it, Hulk smash that subscribe button and you will be one of the finest subscribers known to man. And I'll see you guys in the next one, so don't be late.